our first conversations with Michael Tubbs, former mayor of Stockton, California, founder of the nationwide coalition Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. He has actually moved into some really exciting new spaces, being a policy advisor to Governor Newsom around direct cash policies. He's also started his own new foundation of work to end poverty in California. So we recorded this earlier today. Michael Tubbs is a brand new dad of a second time over. He's got a 2-year-old and he also has, I think, like a 2-week-old. And so, 2-week-old. And so we managed to find a little bit of time in between being dad to be able to have a chat. And I thought it was really important to have his voice here because he's just been leading on so many different efforts. And California is such a central kind of leading state in the work that we're all doing. So I'm going to go ahead and we recorded this. I'm going to toss this over to our tech guru, David, and he's going to go ahead and push play. And we'll do that. So you can't have questions for Michael Tubbs, sadly. I'm sorry about that. But then we'll move right into our other speakers after we listen to Michael. So we all know, the larger basic income community know that you started your work in guaranteed income at that city level when you were mayor of Stockton. This year, the findings for the first year of SEED came out, and it was really great to hear so much about that. But I would love to hear from your perspective what was most exciting or interesting that came out of that first report.
The most interesting or exciting thing that came out of that report for me was just the data to put to rest the notion that giving people financial stability and economic security means they're all of a sudden going to lose all ingenuity, lose all desire, lose the ability to work. And we still hear that even today, but it's great now to point to data. And I think what was powerful for me wasn't that people even stayed the same, but that people were more productive. They were more able to contribute. They were more able to spend time with their families. They were more able to transition from part-time to full-time work. They were more able to have the agency and the power to pick and choose what types of jobs they wanted to do. And that made me incredibly proud because I spent my entire term as mayor arguing with people about this, that one notion that if you give people money, they're not going to work.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get that idea through to Senator Manchin and some of the other people in Congress right now who are really upset about the child tax credit that's, and extending it, and that there has to be a work requirement and all these different components that, we know make it so much more difficult to help families in transition periods, help families do what they know they need to do.
And as a parent of 2 under 2s, we want to give parents money so they don't have to work. Like that requires such intense time, focus, and energy that maybe providing parents the economic cushion, particularly in a country that doesn't offer paid time off, which we should for everyone, a country that doesn't have universal kind of paternal leave and maternal leave policies, which we should at least give people a cushion, right? Because it's parenting is the most important function of democracy. So I'm incredibly proud of the child tax credit. I think that's just a huge first step. And for you, the basic income movement, for all the folks on the ground who have been emailing and calling and soon to be marching, I think everyone should feel really proud of that. Because it's not perfect, but it's a huge leap forward. If you had told me just last year that we would have a guaranteed income for families with children that would be extended to at least 2025, I would have said, no way, we're not there yet. So so I think we should all not think we're done, but really take stock of the work we're doing matters and it's moving the needle.
That's right. Yeah, use it for fuel for the next step. Yeah. Well, I would love to talk a little bit about this year has been a transition year for you as well. And you started to do some work as an advisor to Governor Newsom on guaranteed income and direct cash policies. What's that been like for you?
Yeah, well, it's funny. So I was debating whether to go to DC or to stay in California. And I had originally accepted an offer in DC, but the offer it was some policy stuff, but I wouldn't be like a decision maker. And I mean, there's like all types of people in DC. So I figured that California being the 5th largest economy, the largest state in this nation, sort of always pushing the nation forward, and so much momentum from mayors who are part of Mayors for Guaranteed Income, who are doing guaranteed compliance already. And the governor, he was so excited when the findings came out. He said, Tubbs, help me figure out how do we do at least something to get the ball moving in the state. And then with the work around the Golden State stimulus checks, et cetera. So I'm proud because the conversation has evolved. There was no resistance. It was, okay, how do we do this in a way that the legislator's okay with, that the governor's okay with, that isn't all the way there, but it's a huge step forward. I mean, to have checks given to every Californian making 70K or below, that's huge. The fact that it's okay to give people money. And then also to have money, the first state to allocate money to support some of the guaranteed income pilots with state dollars, with the goal of having some sort of guaranteed income policy in California, whether it's for pregnant people, whether it's for foster youth, which we saw bills, or whether it's for everyone. I could go on and on, but I'm so proud of California. And we see states like New Mexico and others following our lead and saying, okay, we want to do this too. So to have a governor who now, especially after a resounding victory in his recall, who's now sought after as a national political leader, to have a guaranteed income as one of the things he hangs his hat on and one of the things he could say he led on. I think it's an incredible win for the movement. It gives us that much more momentum to keep moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. It's been really exciting to follow the community. You know, we've obviously been following very closely, but it's also been great to see the impact of really kind of the ripple effect of those kinds of decisions and that kind of leadership, and to see so many large scale different guaranteed income pilots being proposed in California. And it really does feel like it's going to be really on the leading forefront of that large set of data that's being collected to be able to answer, you know, all the questions statewide or federal legislation. So really excited for sure. And LA, the LA March is actually a rally this year. Some of the leadership in the Compton Pledge will be there to be able to talk about their work, and many others. So really excited to see what's happening in the larger LA area as well. So,
well, I mean, LA is really ground zero for the guaranteed income movement in this country. You have the amazing work of the Compton Pledge. You have the amazing work of Mayor Garcia with his guaranteed income pilot. You have sort of Mayor Garcetti, who's one of the founding mayors of MGI on our advisory board, Mayors for Guaranteed Income Advisory Board, with a $40 million pilot. You have Supervisor Holly Mitchell in LA County with a $45 million pilot. This is all government money. Like, LA's not messing around with this. You have Councilmember Kerwin Price, who before he knew Mayor Garcetti was talking about guaranteed income, was also reaching out to talk about guaranteed income for South LA. It's just an incredible momentum in LA. And it's weird because it's so controversial. When I was talking about 150 people with philanthropic dollars, there's no controversy about it here. Everyone's excited. The controversy is, how do we get to more people, right? And I think that's just such a big win again for the movement and the work we've done collectively to socialize this concept and make it a given, we made it where's mine? Like, I want this too. This will help me and my family as well.
That's right. Yeah, it is exciting too, just because of, like you mentioned a few minutes ago, the size of California's economy, you actually do, and like the size of the LA County's budget, you actually have the kind of funds that in a lot of other states or even a lot of other cities might not be able to do such grand scale pilot demonstrations, just because their budgets are smaller and it becomes, you know, a harder piece to be able to push forward. But so yeah, I think it's just really cool to see that that the counties, the states that have the money are starting to think about, like, this is the direction to go. Which actually leads me into your most latest endeavor. You're focused on a multi-year effort to eliminate poverty in California. So what's your vision for that? What are you kind of working on as you're getting this up and off the ground?
Yeah, so a big part of why I decided to stay in California and work with Governor Newsom is we have a shared vision around poverty being just such a drain on our state, and that's why guaranteed income is so important. So in that position, really building out a team and an initiative and a focus on how do we build public will to end poverty in California? How do we align sort of policymakers, entertainment, arts, culture around this goal? And then how do we do it? And I think especially because California, for all that's great about California, we also have the highest poverty rate in this nation. It's also incredibly unaffordable to live in California for the vast majority of folks. And that for me I don't like to be, I don't want people to say we're hypocrites. I don't want people to say we're progressive or forward thinking in name only. And if we're going to be a Golden State, it has to be a Golden State for everyone. So it's really just putting a focus on the issue, elevating the issue, making so that everyone who's running for Senate, who's running for assembly, who's running for anything in California has to answer, what are you going to do to eliminate poverty in the state? Because we can do it. We have the resources, we have the expertise, we have a Democratic governor, a Democratic state Senate, and a Democratic assembly. Like if we can't do it in California, then it can't be done. And I just refuse to believe that. So more to come, first quarter next year, but we're building it and really excited. And a lot of it is grounded in sort of what we saw with the work of SEED and Marriage for Guaranteed Income. That someone just has to move first. Someone just has to do it. Someone just has to be audacious to say we can do it. And then the energy follows and people follow. And I think it's also what you guys have done with the income movement, is that you just have to create a tent, create a coalition, and then people will come because people are looking for ways to channel their energy. People see what we see. They see the lack, they see the depravity, they see. And the last thing I'll say, this is maybe probably overly philosophical, but I think that's partly why there's such a intense anger and backlash against homelessness. I think because deep down, everyone knows that it makes no sense for me to be housed in shelter and to have another human being who have to walk by to get to my house not be sheltered. I think it does something to everyone. Some people lash out and become angry at the folks who are homeless. And some people like me get lashed out and get angry at the structures and say, okay, how do we change this so that everyone's treated with the dignity that they deserve?
That's right. I've had conversations with friends and colleagues that live in California, and over the last, one or two election cycles, when different ballot measures and things have been up, just feeling really disappointed in so many people who call themselves progressive or call themselves liberal, but aren't passing the kinds of efforts and putting their heart behind the kinds of things and their money behind the things that are actually going to address things like the homeless community, trying to get housing to be more stabilized, all these different components. And so I just love that you're really targeting and tackling some of that narrative shift and some of that, the real work that has to happen for people to be able to take that one more step forward towards, I'm gonna walk the talk,
Yeah, the goal is to get people to stop hating poor people and hate poverty. That's the goal. Like, how do we don't hate poor people, we hate poverty. And how do you organize around that?
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on, we got another couple minutes, but I would love to understand what, you started to talk a little bit about Q1 2022, what you're looking at. What is it that people that are part of the larger movement can do to help support the work that you're doing, or what's your primary focus, and how is that gonna?
I think there's really like 3 or 4 things. First, the work that everyone's doing is so important. And the most important thing we can do is continue to push to make that child tax credit permanent, particularly before these midterms. It's like we have a window before November 2022 to really push and give our elected officials some courage to do what's necessary. Number 2, I love the work you all have been doing in calling. I get tagged all the time around mayors you guys are calling and reaching out to. Please continue to do so, because I'm not their constituent. So I could call and email and text, but if they don't hear from their folks, like Tubbs, maybe my community's not ready, even though the data tells us that the vast majority of Americans support a guaranteed income. Then number 3, I have a book coming out on November 16th, actually, called The Deeper the Roots. And it's about, basic income is definitely a part. It's about Stockton. It's about governing. It's about winning. It's about losing. It's about family. It's about faith. It's about everything. It's not that it's only been around for 31 years, so it's like a 700-page book. But it's something. It tells a story. But I think it tells a story of not just me, but different individuals who saw something that they did not like and didn't have the answers, didn't have a name before, no one cared who they were, like, but just did it. And from that came energy. And I think for so many people involved in this work, it's important to realize that the people you look up to, the Stacey's, the Mayor Tubbses, the whoever that person is, the Andrew Yangs, et cetera, you know their names because they did something. But before they did something, you didn't know them. And the same, so you have to just do. So yeah, so those are the ways that folks can help.
Awesome. Yes, action in whatever capacity we can do it. You know, and
have to.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, this has just been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much. I know fatherhood and you're taking the time to be with family right now. I'm really thankful that you were able to take a little time and spend some time with us today. So have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your paternity leave, and we'll see you soon when we'll be checking out your book for sure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, take care. So let me go ahead and introduce Anna Aurilio. She's a federal campaign director for economic security projects. She'll turn on her camera and her mic in a sec. She is an expert in direct cash policy on the Hill. She's been working to pass, really for the last couple of years since the pandemic hit in particular, she's been working on monthly or regular multiple stimulus checks. And she also has been working on the child tax credit permanency. I might need to make it so that Anna can turn on her video. Hold on just 1 second. Yay.
There I am. Hello.
Hi, Anna. I think I said Anna and it's Anna. I'm sorry about that.
All right.
How are you doing? It's lovely to see you.
Oh, I'm doing well. It's been quite the crazy day, week, month, year.
We are in the middle of it. We had, for the march on Saturday, we had a lot of members of Congress who were interested in participating, and all of that went out the door with how crazy things are on the Hill right now, trying to get some of the most important pieces of legislation passed that maybe has happened in my generation. So we're totally more than happy to have them stick to that. And but it's definitely been exciting to see what's been happening in the community. I would love to, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into where things are right now and kind of the work that is happening. But I think it'd be great to take a little bit of a step back and just look at 2021 as a whole, because it has been a huge year for direct cash policies. Maybe just like Michael Tubbs just said, even just a year ago, if somebody said this is where we were going to be, that millions of families were going to be receiving monthly checks, it kind of seemed unfathomable. So I'd love to hear a little bit more of what you think are some of those key moments that have happened that have gotten us where we are right now.
Yeah, and first, just, huge shout out to Income Movement and the work that you all are doing to really just keep this going, right? So over the last year, as you heard from Mayor Tubbs and others, we went from a catastrophic place economy-wise, where and a catastrophic government and a catastrophic pandemic. And one of the few bright lights that came out of that was really an increased appreciation and support for the role of cash in terms of creating something that people could fall back on, creating a floor that would help people get through the year. And so the things, as we started out this year, right, first, we weren't even sure we were going to have a new administration because there were, violent insurrections in the Capitol, and we had a contested seat in Georgia. And cash actually played a huge role in that. I mean, when I started working on these issues 3 years ago, and Economic Security Project said, "Oh, do you want to work on a guaranteed income?" And I was like, "Okay, well, I don't know how long it's going to take for us to get that in Congress. So, we'll work on these refundable tax credits first. But I don't know how long that'll take." And then really to have us come to a point where in the fall of 2020 and in the early part of 2021, the control of the Senate actually at some level hinged on who was going to deliver the next round of stimulus checks to people. So that was kind of awesome, right? That really, you know, Senator Warnock really just leaned into the issue of who was going to deliver for people. And by this point, the stimulus checks have become so critical to folks that, you know, they flipped a red state in doing that. So that was pretty tremendous. That was really a moment where, you know, we said, look, the opportunity has really changed here. And then with the American Rescue Package, and, you know, many of us have been on the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, and doing things to make the child tax credit more like a basic income for children, right? Making it monthly, making it advanceable, making sure that it got to all the kids, especially the lowest income kids who had been left out. All of those things getting into the American Rescue Package, again, I think it showed the growing power and popularity of cash. So those were key moments over the last, you know, 8 to 12 months that I think really have shown us how far we've come.
And, you know, for us that are in the space of basic income and are fighting for guaranteed basic income, we obviously see the CTC as a guaranteed income for families. It's how we talk about it internally. It's a lot of how different organizations publicly are wanting to promote it, so that it's kind of connecting the dots for all of the people out there in the world that don't think about or know about basic income. But I'm curious to understand, you work really closely on the Hill with a lot of other organizations who are kind of a coalition of organizations working on this, having lots of conversations with members of Congress. Are they thinking about this as a guaranteed income for families? Like, how are they thinking about it?
It's a really good question. And I think where you sit depends on how you see this, right? So obviously all of us that see the guaranteed income is the ultimate goal that we're going to work towards, and probably quicker than anyone could imagine, right? You know, we see it very clearly like that. And there's, you know, another astounding thing that happened last year where there were several members of Congress, new incoming members of Congress, that actually very publicly ran on the concept of a guaranteed income. So we have way more champs now in the Congress than we ever had as well. So for all those people, they get it and they're embracing it. For a whole set of other people, they're more focused on, you know, sort of a more poverty angle, right? Let's cut child poverty in half, and let's help you know, end food insecurity for families with children, and that's all perfectly valid as well. And then there's another set of people that really want to frame this up as a middle class tax cut, right? This is the largest middle class tax cut in a generation for families, which is also true. So you know, at the end of the day, because I'm an advocate in Congress, I care a lot about how people talk about things, but I also want us to actually win. And so if we can move people along for the whole set of reasons to actually make this permanent, and in so doing create a monthly guaranteed income for children, that is perfectly excellent, because I think then people will come along as they start to see the actual data and the benefits. So does that make sense?
No, yeah. I'm a little bit curious to know, are we still, you know, I wonder, is the term guaranteed income or unconditional basic income, you know, or any of those, are those terms that turn off a certain number of the, even on the liberal side when you're having conversations? Is it strategic to not talk about it in those terms with certain people, or, you know, and go at it from that poverty side? Just understanding like your own strategy for the language, because obviously on the grassroots side, we send letters to our members of Congress all the time, and it's really helpful to understand from your perspective, like, how do you thread that needle or kind of dance that line?
Yeah, I think for some offices and some moderates, they are really a little bit afraid of the term guaranteed income and basic income. And I do think the polling has shown, you know, increasing support for those terms. So I think the thing that we've really tried to do is just focus on the impacts. You know, here are the number of children in your district that weren't getting this that will now get it. Here is the family, the single mom of 3 in Arizona, who is able to get the sports equipment for her kids so that her kid can now participate in sports that they couldn't ever before. Here's another family that's taking care of their elderly parents, and one of the adults has to stay home and take care of the kids and the parents, and this is just easing them. So to be able to put real faces on this and really explain people what it is, I think we'll start chipping away then at whatever stigma or negative might attach to the term basic income. But the reality is Republicans really haven't gone after the child tax credit.
No.
Right? In fact, none of them voted for the rescue plan, but a bunch of them want to take credit for the monthly checks. So that is where the proof is going to be in the pudding, right? As more and more people get them, and as we see the benefits of it, I think we'll be able to insert the guaranteed income term into the conversation more and more. But I think for right now, we got to go with what works. And what works in my mind for the vast majority of congressional offices is just the people that are benefiting.
Yeah, that's right. I'd love to understand a little bit more. So you've been in the work, having the conversations. What are you seeing are those best strategies for moving forward, for how to build on and expand on where we are right now so we can get more and more checks to people? Because we know, just like you said at the beginning, when I first came on the Economic Security Project, it was like, yes, guaranteed income, but right now let's just try to figure out EITC, because that might be where there's a little bit of leverage. Right. We've made these huge strides very quickly. Like what are you seeing is our best chances to keep the momentum going and expand recipients?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things on the child tax credit in particular. I think we built like a very broad coalition of organizations, right? So that you can make the point that this is very good for families in rural areas. It turns out, rural areas benefit disproportionately because people tend to be lower income on this. You can make the case, for example, that we're writing a historic racial inequity, because until the American Rescue Package happened, the child tax credit left out 27 million children from getting the full credit who are low income or no income. And those children are disproportionately Black and Latino. In fact, about half of Black children and about half of Latino children were left out of the full child tax credit before the rescue plan, compared to, depending on who you talk to, about a third or a fifth of white children. So that's actually redlining for children, right? And so I think that's a really important point for folks to understand, that if we're going to move forward and have a racially equitable recovery, we have to keep it going to people at the bottom end of the income scale. So that's one tack, right? Is let's have the coalition as broad as we can so that everyone who benefits can be part of this. Because the flip side of the equation is there's not really a lot of people who are opposed to the child tax credit per se, but there's a lot of moderates who are worried about the cost. And the reason they're worried about the cost is because this package, this Build Back Better package that includes an expansion of the child tax credit and hopefully permanent, and the earned income tax credit, it's supposed to be paid for by making wealthy people and corporations pay their fair share. So you have every corporate lobbyist, every large donor, going to their congressional offices saying, don't raise taxes on me. And this is where I do think the work that the income movement has done and so many other community organizations, putting a real face and really being the lobbyist for working class and lower income folks, that is going to be critical, right? Because it is time for the wealthy and corporations to pay their fair share, many of whom pay very, very little compared to what most people pay, or zero. And so it's time, as Congresswoman Gwen Moore has famously said, it's time to stop pretending we don't have enough money. We have plenty of money in this country. It's time to get it to the people that need it the most. So I do think that's the strategy that is gonna, win the day, right? Is just overwhelming coalition of people on the ground, but really raising our voices. Because I have to say, I was even talking to a really sympathetic ally yesterday in the Senate, and they were like, look, we have every single business in our state that thinks their taxes are going up coming to talk to us, every single one separately.
Boy, we gotta have the balance there so that they're hearing from people who are benefiting from this, which is a great, a great maybe segue into the last piece. What is the role of grassroots, the grassroots community in this work, and what have you seen that has been kind of most successful or have highest impact, so we can make sure collectively we're all kind of focused in the right direction?
Yeah, I'll say two things. One is pretty detailed, right? Which is, this was a new program, right? We took something that was an annual tax refund that left out a lot of people that needed to get it and turned it into a monthly advance payment. And so there's a lot of outreach that needed to happen and education that needed to happen, and making sure that this program actually starts on time and gets out and reaches the people. And it hasn't been smooth sailing, right? There's still people that aren't getting it. People who don't usually file taxes, they're not connected to the tax system. So I think one role that grassroots organizations can play is just educating your members, showing people how they can get it, how they're eligible for it. And as time has gone on, the whole system of doing it has gotten better. But again, it's not quite there yet. So outreach and making sure people actually get their money is really important. And then the second part of that is, let's turn all of that energy and excitement, and let's turn all of the people who already understand the power of monthly cash and how it can create a floor for people, how it can help people improve their health, their financial stability, their mental and physical health, how it can give you more agency and self-determination, right? You have the opportunity to really make choices. You could get an internship that will lead you to a better job. You could pay for additional childcare so that you can take classes. All of those things, it's just freedom and independence to be able to make your own choices. I think all of that needs to be translated into the decision makers who are otherwise just hearing from the corporate lobbyists saying, don't raise my taxes. So.
Okay, so making phone calls, writing letters, showing up to offices. We all have, people in larger cities actually have congressional offices often in their communities. Some are still not open with COVID, but there's lots of things that you can do. You're allowed to go into an office and say, hey, I'm a constituent and I have something that I want you to be aware of. So there's so many different things that we can do, and love hearing that some of the work that we've all been doing is the right kind of work, but helping, I think the people who are receiving the child tax credit, we have a whole new base of people that can become activated around this. And so making sure we're doing our part to be those deep advocates, and bringing new people in so that they know that they have an opportunity to fight and make sure that this continues and is made permanent. So wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Anna. Really love being able to chat with you. Always love hearing you. It's any meeting that I'm in and you start talking about what's going on, I'm like, tell me, Anna, tell me what's going on. You always lay it out so well. So I really appreciate that you took some time with us tonight. And we'll continue to be part of the coalition, and bringing ESP and the work you guys are doing to the grassroots, because I think this next year is going to be pretty critical. So.
Thank you. You all have been incredible partners. And I mean, we are in the thick of it right now, right? So this is a make or break moment to get this whole thing over the finish line, and so grateful to be working alongside you in this work, because it's been amazing to see.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
So Adam Rosen is the CEO of Steady, which is an app designed to help self-employed and gig workers access resources and benefits and career mentorship. and so many more important pieces, really with the primary goal of creating a more steady income. So we can start to see why it is that you guys have started to land into the guaranteed income space. We're going to talk a little bit about that, your app and the work that you do. But one thing that's been really exciting and important over the last year or two is that you guys have started to move into direct cash. And so I want to make sure we have a chance to talk a little bit about the kind of inception of that, the inspiration for that, and then also what this last 12 months has looked like for you guys, which has been a bit of a whirlwind and pretty fantastic. So let's start with the beginning, really, of how you guys started to think that cash and direct grants, and there's this need for something other than just helping provide people to find better work or more shifts and more income through a kind of traditional work space.
Sure, I appreciate that, Stacey. Thanks for having me, and thank you for the continued work that that you're leading through the income movement. So glad to be here today. So yeah, I mean, at its core, Steady is a data platform, right? And all those things you talk about, we do because we have access to a tremendous data set across our nearly 4 million members now on our platform that consists of predominantly hourly and gig workers, right? And so for us, historically, our focus was on taking all of the income data that we have relative to individuals and providing them with more transparency around what type of work they could do to increase their income potential. In order to do that, first we had to understand their income, right? And we do that through the connectivity to their financial accounts, things like their bank accounts, their payroll accounts, et cetera. And we utilize that data to help make recommendations to them. So once we started to understand their income, we became very fearful of what we were seeing, right? Specifically with a large portion of our audience being individuals who have no safety net. And so when we saw drops in income, expense shocks, we saw tremendous financial pain, right? And we could see this through the data, right? Through access to their financial accounts. So we saw things like a reduction in food expenditures. We saw things like just a dramatic drop in income, right? For individuals, we saw the increase in usage of payday loans and credit cards, things that just overdraft fees, things that just demonstrate very negative situation. And so for us, when this happened, we had the fortune of partnering with a group called the Workers Lab in the Bay Area, who we worked together with to establish in 2019 an emergency cash grant program for gig workers in early to mid 2019, who again had no safety net. And so we identified those workers when we had them on our platform who had income loss, right? And we deposited cash into their accounts, no questions asked, right? Because we have that direct access to their deposit accounts. We then measured the outcome and looked at those individuals who received the cash versus those that didn't, and were blown away by what we saw, which was with a single deposit of between $500 or $1,000 to $1,000, those individuals that received cash versus those that had had similar income shock, those that received it outperformed in earned income, right, from work by 41% in the following 6 months, those who didn't receive the cash, right? And then when we started combining that with our qualitative analysis, with dialogue with these individuals, we saw, listen, they were able to pay the bills. They were able to put food on the table when that shock occurred so that they could focus on solving the bigger problem rather than simply having to worry every day about how do I make $50 to put food on the table, right? And so that really kicked off this interest. So when the pandemic struck, we had built this platform that enabled us to identify income loss, distribute cash directly into their deposit accounts, and measure impact, right, through the continuous linkage to the deposit account. So the Workers Lab and us teamed up again and raised millions of dollars that we were then able to do the same thing with at scale, just given how many individuals had lost income, right? What that led us to then last year was a partnership initially with Humanity Forward, to start to automate and provide scalability to universal basic income endeavors, right? Because they've historically been so manual. So for us, utilizing our system, they were able to quickly scale programs so that, again, they could quickly identify cohorts, distribute, measure outcome without having to worry about all of those various different pieces. And that led us now to partnering with I also call them Meritubs still, but with Meritubs and MGI to provide the technical foundation for over 20 of the city participants.
So amazing kind of the in a very short amount of time going from, okay, we see what's going on with our members, and we're going to give, one-time cash grants to help them through these like very, very difficult times, to realizing that that there's already things out there, programs out there that are doing this on a regular basis, that are thinking about what would it mean to have an infusion of additional money, additional income every single month. And it feels so much like the timing of Steady, and not just the timing of you as an organization, but that you are you talk about data and like the use of data and thinking about data, and in many ways, I mean, we know that banks right now, and there's a lot of institutions that have access to all of that data. What they choose to do with that data is something very different. What you guys are choosing to do with that data is give it back to the people, to give it, do intelligent things with it that helps them know how to take action, helps them know what to do, what next steps they need to take. And so like the transparency of data and the sharing of data and sharing of the bigger vision of what you're seeing, so that others can learn from each other, is just so important and impactful. And in some ways, I think of like, you guys are the data for good kind of side of things. I think a lot of us as users, where you're like, oh my God, there's data, like there's banking data, like they're seeing that, like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? When it gets translated into things like, well, we know who's hurting, and we can make sure they get cash right away. That immediacy and the ability to be able to do that is just so important and so critical.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit more about the pilots themselves. So you're lining up to do distribution for over 20 pilots across the country. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like, and what your kind of goals are, or how you're using your platform to be able to do that.
Well, the amazing thing is, Stacey, that we'll run those 20 pilots with one person. Okay. And so for us, it's certain cities have identified cohorts that they'll direct to link up their accounts to the Steady app. In most instances, we're identifying cohorts for them based on our member population, right? They're giving us the definition of what they want those members to be, and we're presenting them with different cohort ideas, and they're selecting those, right? So once that happens, we automate the cash distribution because we have the connection to their accounts. So we don't have to worry about putting it on a payroll card, and are they getting it? And is that payroll card usable, that prepaid card usable different places, right? We don't have to worry about that, right? And so for us, we're putting it into whatever account they use, which quite frankly can also be a digital wallet. So if they're using Venmo, they're using Cash App, they're using PayPal, right? It doesn't need to be a traditional bank account. So we're trying to capture, virtually everyone, right? And hopefully we can capture everyone. And then from there, right, once the cash is distributed, we have that continued connectivity to the deposit accounts, right? And so for us, we're looking at what happens to their income, right? Over what time period once they start to receive the cash grants. In addition to that, what happens to other financial health metrics in their deposit account? Do their overdraft fees alleviate? Do their use of payday loans alleviate? Does do things like use of credit cards, do they start to pay down credit card debt, right? To the extent that they have it. A variety of other metrics that we can look at to view those individuals. And then the great thing is that because of the size of our member base, we build control groups, right? So those that are lookalike audiences that aren't receiving, unfortunately, participation in the funds. Hopefully, eventually they all will. That's why we're doing this. But for today, those that aren't, we're able to use those as a control group to measure what was the performance of those that received cash versus those that didn't, and provide that data together to the Center for Guaranteed Income Research, right, with Stacey and Amy, who you know well, they're amazing, for them to be able to write research that hopefully then helps to influence policy. But I think the main takeaway is that historically, massive manpower requirements to run a UBI endeavor, right? Going out, sending people to manually find cohorts, figuring out how to get each of them money, making sure they got the money, like interviewing all of them and having to rely on imperfect data because they're getting interview data only, right? And that all required manpower. We're running 20 cities with one person, right? Because of automation, one person total. So, for us, that's what this is all about, right? One quick tangent is that we're trying to extend this into other mechanisms for cash. So today, in fact, it was announced by the state of Louisiana, our first partnership with the state to accelerate benefits for 1099 workers to receive what has been a year-plus backlog for CARES Act pandemic unemployment benefits, right? Individuals that applied over a year ago, but because of the manual processing requirement, because the 1099 workers, states and state agencies don't have access to that data, they didn't receive their benefits. We're automating that all away so that we can clear that backlog out immediately, right? And they came out with the press release on that today. So the technology exists, right? And it just needs to be deployed so that we can actually create scale and make these things be on the scale they need to be and provide the data necessary to hopefully really influence policy.
Well, and what you start to get at, I think I'm gonna quote the data wrong, so I apologize ahead of time. But in like the state of Mississippi, I think it's something like 4% of people who should be receiving some kind of benefit are actually receiving it, and whether that's because the system is intentionally designed to limit the number of people to have access, or just the kind of broken nature, the nature of so much paperwork, so much disconnection between what somebody who's trying to access those funds or those programs, what they need to do versus what they actually even have access to and are able to provide, especially as 1099 workers. It feels like really what you're talking about is the foundation for an entirely new way for individuals to talk to their state and potentially eventually federal governments around what's happening with them economically, and getting them the right kind of data quickly so that you're limiting the amount of churn and back and forth around this process.
That's right. And adding a layer of automation. And I think your point on 1099 workers is that, unfortunately, right, what we see with social services is that, like a lot of things, they've been built around the backbone of a quote unquote traditional worker, right, which is someone who generates all of their income from a full-time W-2 job. The problem is that so many Americans that need those social services the most, and unfortunately, so many of those that are from underserved populations, minority populations, participate in alternative forms of work, right? They're doing 1099 work. They're working multiple jobs, right, to pay the bills, which is a whole nother discussion on why UBI needs to be there, because no one should be working multiple jobs, but they are, right? And the system is broken in that it has no mechanism for being able to provide a transfer of data for those individuals. And so there's a couple of factors. One is they're not aware of what they qualify for, right, which we see time and time again. And then secondarily, the big friction point is, they're required, as opposed to if you're a full-time W-2 worker, the state takes care of everything, right, when you apply. If you're a 1099 worker, you've got to go print out, in certain instances, your bank statements for 18 months and wait for someone to review 200 sheets of paper at the state agency that you might wait 6 months or a year for, right? That's not right.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned in there two things as you were talking. You've said the word automation many times, and for a lot of people in the basic income community, automation gets us to what's happening in the workspace, like what's happening with jobs and access to jobs now and down the line. And I think, and you started to hint on this idea of you get to have a steady, via the data that you are looking at, you're able to have a pretty big picture view into what's happening in the space of work and income in ways that in some ways maybe we haven't ever seen collected together in one place. So I'd love to understand why, out of what you're seeing, why are you such a big proponent of guaranteed income? Why do you think this is an important next piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, I think part of it is I touched on is that people shouldn't be working 3 or 4 different jobs every month, right? People shouldn't be, after working 3 or 4 different jobs every month, paying $70 a month in overdraft fees because they are living so closely on the margin. they're working 3 or 4 jobs, they shouldn't have to have no safety net, right? So that they can't be in a position where they can take care of themselves in the event of an expense shock or an income shock. And they shouldn't be in a position where they're working 3 or 4 jobs and they have no employer sponsored or public sector sponsored safety net, right? That's readily available. And what I'll say is, prior to the pandemic, right, we saw everything that I'm talking about, right, is a massive underemployment challenge, right? Because even the reason people were coming to study, millions of them, is they still couldn't find enough work, even though they were willing to work multiple jobs. Now, coming out of the backside of the pandemic, I'm frightened, right? Because yes, we do have a very unique look into the data set of nearly 4 million people who work at the largest employers in the country, doing everything from retail to hospitality to food services to logistics and transportation, gig work, whatever you want to call it. And those people that are going back to work, in many instances, are not earning what they were earning before, right? They're going back to work and they're going back at 15 hours a week instead of 25 or 30 for a single job. They're going back in jobs that have some type of tip-based income and their tips are lower, right? So that underemployment challenge is being hugely exacerbated. And when you hear about this huge number of job openings, right, those are not one-for-one jobs, right? Those are jobs that are not what they looked like pre-pandemic. They're service industry jobs with highly variable income levels, right? Based on, the flexibility of the hours that are provided. And so for me, that's frightening, right? And we're living in a world where you compound that now with the investment in automation, and there's not enough work, right? There's not enough work for people to do in order to generate what we should be providing in the way of a livable wage for people in the society that we're living in today. So I think it's a necessity, right? I don't think there's any way that we're going to survive, right, as an institution, right, to the extent that we don't move aggressively down this front.
Well, we're coming to the top of our time together. This has been, I feel like this is kind of ending on a little bit of a bleak.
I'm sorry.
This is the world you live in, Adam. So you're just like, welcome to it. But the work of, the work that you're doing to help make the implementation demonstrations just so easy to do, that makes it so that, moving Nashville forward, who we talked to earlier this week, they are, as they talked about it, they're a group of volunteers who have come together and decided they're going to implement basic income in their community, which is incredibly powerful. And they're targeting, a pretty big sized pilot down the line. And so the ability to be able to work with organizations like Steady to be able to streamline that so that really as much money as possible is going into the pockets of people and not into the administrative. And the administrative, there's certain parts of the administrative of social work and community outreach and things like that are really critical. But if you can have the, less money going to somebody who's having to shuffle papers around, it means more money going into the hands of community members. And it's just so fabulous that that you're doing that work and that you're just giving it to free for all the pilots, like it's there. And that is, it's very inspiring. And I'm excited to hear in 2022 where things go, because I know so many of these pilots are just starting to kick off or are going to soon. So looking forward to having next conversations in the spring of 2022 and see how things are going.
Well, thank you for your leadership, Stacey, in this regard, and I appreciate you having me.
Well, have a wonderful rest of your evening. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Well, this is a really great moment to move into a conversation about an amazing amount of work that is actually happening on the coalition side of direct cash work that's happening, not policy on the Hill, but direct cash that's happening in communities. And we have an amazing leader to be able to guide us through this conversation. Aisha, hello. So Aisha, Nyandoro, it's so good to see you. I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, girl, best life living. I'm here.
Well, I'm so glad you're here in this moment with us.
So glad to be here. Given, the last 19 months, here is good.
Yeah, totally. So for those, I think everybody that's watching this live right now probably knows who you are because you are such an integrated part of an important part of our community. But I'm going to say a little bit about you so that when we post this up on YouTube and share it far and wide, people have a sense. So you are the founder of Magnolia's Mothers Trust and the CEO of Springboard to Opportunities. Magnolia Mothers Trust is one of the first pilots of this kind of modern era that ran not just once, not just twice, but you're in the middle of your third cohort of moms, single moms in Jackson, Mississippi. You also have done, it's been a pretty amazing year. You've also co-founded and co-chair the Guaranteed Income Community of Practice with Madeline Naley at Economic Security Project. And so we're going to dig into both of those pieces because there's just so much to cover, but really excited to be here with you.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with Magnolia Mothers Trust. You're in the third cohort of moms that are part of a one-year program. What have you learned? I'm curious because I've talked with you at key times as new cohorts are coming on, but I haven't talked with you since you launched the third cohort. What are the things that you learned in the first cohorts that are either surprising or inspiring or have helped inform how you are running the third one?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So just for level setting for folks who aren't familiar, the Magnolia Mothers Trust provides $1,000 a month for 12 months to Black mothers that live in federally subsidized affordable housing. So it's $12,000 annually. And we, in essence, are doubling the income of a lot of the families that we work with. And what we've learned from, so we started this work in 2018. What we've learned from since then, it's really hard to quantify because for the last two cohorts, quite frankly, we have had the entire reality of COVID and the pandemic. So it's really different points in time where the data are telling very different stories, but at the end of the day, the story remains the same. It's that cash matters. Cash matters in emergency, cash matters in your day-to-day life, cash matters when you're trying to actualize dreams and set goals and forecast and plan. So that's what that continues to be the remaining constant in the thread that we went into this knowing and that continues to manifest itself, but the way in which the cash mattering it shows up, it's very different than it was in 2008, than it was in 2020, than it is now in 2021. So yeah.
So what, and we can go into really since the pandemic if you want, or just focus on this latest cohort, because we are thinking, it's part of what we're doing today is looking back, reflecting on the last 12 months and finding inspiration, finding those opportunities that are going to help us as a community kind of be fueled for the march that's happening on Saturday, but also for the work that is to come. So are there some inspiring or exciting things that you have experienced in the last year as part of Magnolia Mothers Trust that you want to share with the community?
Every day is inspiring and exciting with my work. It's stressful, but every day is inspiring. I think the pieces this year specifically in the last 12 months that have been the most inspiring are seeing that with the guaranteed income that we provide, and not just even the last year, really in like the last 3 months, with the guaranteed income that we're providing, with the CTC that our moms are getting, the level in which moms are able to level up quite quickly has been beautiful and inspiring to work. So, moms went from thinking that, okay, it'll take me 6 months to accomplish this goal to, okay, wow, it's only going to take me 2 months where I can accomplish this goal now. So that has been really beautiful to see. We have seen our moms, one piece from the last, we just did some follow-up data from our first cohort, maybe about a month ago with our evaluators. And we found out that of the 20 women, so when we started in 2018, we had 20 women. In the second year, we had 110 women. And this year we have 100 women. Of the 20 women, our first year that we work with and follow up with them, we have found out that 19 of those folks have moved out of affordable housing. So that's amazing. That's inspiring. That tells the story about how cash really allows you to manifest so much for yourselves and your family, which we already knew. So that has been really inspiring, and gives me the opportunity to be like, whoa, we're going to keep it moving. And, which I already felt, but sometimes you just need that burst of energy to be like, all right, we're on to something, we're going to keep it moving. So it's been, it's been beautiful to see. And then, like I said, really it's been beautiful to see the guaranteed income coupled with the CTC, and how our moms are really just taking that as an opportunity to live out loud so much bolder than they were prior to.
I know that we've screened the Inherent Good film several times, and I've watched it probably 6 times. I still just get teary and goosebumps at all the right moments. But one of the things that I remember that a little bit of time, just a small amount of time, is spent on in the film is around the work that you're doing, the cohorts you're doing are for a single year, and how do you prepare? How do the moms kind of prepare for not being, not receiving the guaranteed income once they leave? And I think, as you've been talking about the child tax credit and the importance of it, and here collectively as part of our movement, we're really fighting for that to be made permanent. I'm really looking forward to, if in this fight we get it to be permanent, and that's something that moms can continue to rely on. I'd love to hear in a year or two, when you're looking back on your 3rd cohort, what has happened for them when monthly cash continued in their lives even after they left the cohort.
I know, me too, which is why I'm like, let's make it permanent, which is, what I think, not just with the CTC, but guaranteed income and all of this work, which is really, why we're all saying, okay, how do we take these pilots and demonstrations and get to policy? Because we do know that's how change is sustained. We do know that all of the various work that we are doing is only providing a proof of concept. And even though the work is important and it's instrumental, a community-based organization cannot do it alone. So even though there are multitudes of pilots happening right now, it's all in isolation of a community unless we get to policy, unless we get to sustainability, unless we get to systemic change and recognizing, and well, not just recognizing, changing our relationship with the way that we view cash without restrictions in this country, and specifically cash without restrictions to individuals that live in poverty. We don't have a problem with cash without restrictions for rich people and middle-class people. It is the rest of individuals who we feel that we have to govern and tell them how to go about spending their resources. So.
That's right. That's right. Well, I would love to talk a little bit. One of the great and really exciting developments this year was the creation of Guaranteed Income Community of Practice. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is and what was the inspiration and kind of process to make it happen?
Yeah, so the Guaranteed Income Community of Practice is just that. It's a collective, a think tank of various organizations that are community-based, that are in a planning, implementation, development process of a guaranteed income. So it really is a community where folks can connect and learn. It is convened by not just Springboard and Economic Security Project, but 5 other partners who have been working in the space of guaranteed income for a number of years. And we have monthly meetings where we share across best practices, resources, education tools, really so that we can continue just to build the movement forward and to make sure that every individual that is thinking about a guaranteed income or planning a guaranteed income, that they have the support necessary. When we started this work, I started thinking about this work in 2017, it was sort of like us working in isolation with a few other partners. It was like SEED and ESP and, some various academia partners talking about guaranteed income or universal basic income. At the time was the language we were using, but there's so much that we have learned that now we can share it out. And there's so much that we are all collectively learning is how do we really go about making sure that best practices are lifted up and that individuals can get to implementation as soon as possible, and that we can share learning across. We don't have to keep all of our learnings in isolation or siloed. That's not what community is about. That's not what partnering is about. So it really is how do we all move towards the same North Star of supporting communities and supporting individuals. So
it's been we Income Movement is part of the community of practice, and we it's pretty exciting just being in one of the convenings and having 150 other people. It's kind of amazing.
It's amazing. I mean, I mean, really, I mean, Stacey, this time last year even, or definitely 3 years ago, if you told me that it would be 150 of us or so talking about guaranteed income and folks would be looking at us like we had all lost our minds, I was like, stop playing. But the fact that, that's the ideal of a guaranteed income, it's not something that is so novel or radical anymore. So even if you're not a part of the community of practice or you're not implementing it, you probably have heard of it in your household. So it's a beautiful space to be in, but it really is, okay, how do we harness all of this momentum? Because it is a moment. So how do we harness the momentum? How do we harness the moment? And how do we really speed up the learning around guaranteed income? How do we all collectively share the data and those pieces? How do we speed up the learning and get it to the policymakers so that we really can get the win that we need for sustainability, which is permanency? And that's rather permanency with CTC, permanency with a guaranteed income. However we get there, let's get cash unrestricted to families that need it.
That's right. That's right. I think one of the things that's been really interesting being part of the community of practice is seeing the really diverse set of organizations and individuals that are part of it. So you're on a call, with 150 people, and then you guys just do such a great job of like breakout rooms, and so people are having a chance to get to know each other and understand the work that's happening, and it's really diverse. I mean, it's kind of fascinating. People who are coming at it from like land developers who for like nonprofits, and they're thinking about like what's the relationship with housing and direct cash, and how do we think about this in a different way? And now they're implementing things that I would never even think of connecting, but the creativity and like excitement and energy, and really the kind of the aha moment it feels like we are seeing in these conversations with people who have been doing really great work in a variety of spaces, who are realizing like, oh, direct cash is an important thing for us to do, to add to our list of initiatives, our list of things.
That's exactly right. So you're right. So it is a very diverse community. And I think that's the beauty of where guaranteed income is in this moment in the conversations, that so many folks are coming at it from so many different ways and so many different angles and targeting very specific communities. With our work, we're targeting moms, but there are individuals who are targeting specific neighborhoods. There are individuals who are looking at, homeless youth, or individuals about to age out of the foster care system. There are folks who are looking at returning citizens. There are so many different angles in which you can come at this. But once again, the beauty is at the end of the day, it's the same North Star. It really is direct cash, supporting individuals, recognizing that individuals have the agency and the dignity, and have the agency to know what it is that they need for themselves. And how do we turn that agency into dignity with cash? Not another program, not another service, which for me, I run an organization that provides services and programs, y'all, so I get it. But not another program, not another service, just give individuals what it is that they need and let them go about getting whatever programs or services on their own.
So I know you have to get going in just a moment. My last question to you, before we talked a little bit about this, the kind of diversity of the community of practice, you said we have to harness the moment and speed up the learning. We have to take advantage of this, the moment that we find ourselves in. How can we, the kind of greater grassroots community of supporters of basic income, how can we help do that work with you?
Y'all already are. I think by the fact that you have the entire income movement and that you all are doing the march and you're having these fireside chats, I think you're doing a beautiful job, Stacey, of mobilizing the broader grassroots community and getting them engaged in the conversations. So I think that's what we need to continue to do, to continue to have the conversations. Let's not get to complacency of saying, okay, we have won this thing, because we haven't. We still don't have a permanent CDC. We still haven't won the fight for income equality. So let's continue to not get bored, which we have the tendency to do in this country really, really fast. Yeah. We love bright and shiny. So let's not move on to the next thing, because this thing has not been won. We have not won the fight on guaranteed income. So we have to continue to be the advocates and continue to talk about the work and continue to keep the momentum going and hold our elected officials accountable until we get what it is that we know families need.
Wonderful. Well, that is a lovely place to end this conversation. It was so wonderful to be in community, in conversation with you for the last 15 or 20 minutes. And I know there's going to be lots of opportunities.
Lots of more conversations. This is just one time I'm talking to you.
I know,
exactly.
So
many more.
Exactly. Well, thank you for taking some time. We'll talk again soon. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your evening. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. We've talked with policy people. We've talked with elected officials that were mayors and are now doing work at the state level, data, and then pilots. We absolutely must talk to community organizers. This is the work that we do together. This is the work that is making the basic income march possible. And so I am very excited to be able to bring Carrie Anne, introduce Carrie Anne and bring her up so that we can have a conversation together about the work that she's doing. Hi, Carrie Anne.
Hey, Stacey, how are you?
Good, it's lovely to see you.
You too, and wow, how inspiring and what amazing work. And I'm just so honored to be in the same room as those people, and everything they're doing is just really, it's motivational for sure.
Awesome, I know, it is. Getting to work with all these amazing people is in and of itself inspiring. And I count you as one of those people. We've had a chance to meet with you and other city organizers, community organizers, almost weekly for several months as we've been doing the work in prepping for the Basic Income March. But I wanted to, well, first let me introduce you a little bit so that people know who you are, and then we're gonna dig into some things. So Carrie Anne is a single mom born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. She grew up inspired by the nonviolent work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and strives to find every opportunity to continue his advocacy, both for eradicating poverty and for pushing for racial equality, which is in Atlanta, noble and important work. We'll talk about, we're gonna talk a little bit about your experience as a grassroots organizer in Georgia, and we're going to talk about guaranteed income and your work in the UBI and basic income space, but we're going to talk about kind of a wider and broader work that you've been doing in Atlanta for the last year also, because this is what's going to be inspiring for me. I'm excited to dig into this because when we were prepping for this, you mentioned a few things. I was like, oh, I didn't know you did that. Okay, I want to hear. So welcome. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, so first, let's just understand your journey towards basic income. So what brought you to the idea of basic income? And you devote a pretty significant amount of your free time, which probably as a single mom, you don't have very much of, for the work to advocate for this. Tell me about what fuels you.
So my daughter Evelyn is 5, and anybody who knows me knows she goes to all my events. If I'm somewhere, she's right next to me holding a sign. So I love that I have a little partner in crime.
Nice.
But her father was physically abusive to both of us, and so we left him when she was an infant. So no child support, no contact, no help or anything besides family. But so I worked a retail job, $10 an hour at night, and my mom would watch her at night, so I didn't have a daycare cost and all that. And I got food stamps and I had Medicaid, and we were getting by. We were okay. Needs were met, but every single purchase had to be budgeted, and there was no extracurricular activities. We had to turn down play dates that weren't just at the park. Like, it wasn't living. And I remember like being at work at night, just being like, God, if only I could make $15 an hour. If I could make $15 an hour, everything would be fine. And this was back when the fight for 15 was gaining recognition. And I was like, yes, we need $15 an hour. So circumstances change. I got an office job a couple of years later, $15 an hour. But now I'm working 9 to 5. So my mom can't watch Evelyn anymore. So now I have daycare. And I did apply for daycare assistance, and they paid half of it, but I still had to pay $400 a month, and then I have the transportation costs and the new clothes for the office, and don't qualify for food stamps anymore, making $15 an hour. And you're also in a new tax bracket, thanks to Trump's tax law. I had $1,000 taken out of my return that I was used to getting. So I just felt really despondent. I was like, well, where do we go from here? this was my whole thing, was like, if we make $15 an hour, that's a living wage, we'll be able to live. And here I am sharing a 1-bedroom apartment with my daughter. We don't have cable, we don't have internet. I'm not in credit card debt. My car's paid for, and I still can't afford to really live and enjoy my life. And so I didn't want to be here anymore. I was like, I don't see a way out of this. And then I heard Andrew Yang speak at the Democratic debate, and I was like, what a freedom dividend, $1,000 a month. Well, that's perfect. That's exactly what everyone needs, not just me, but everyone deserves that. And so my first in real life Yang Gang event was the first basic income march in 2019. And it was amazing. And it really inspired me to become more active in all politics because I had such a great time. And it inspired me to start hosting the march because I had such a good time and met friends and volunteers who I still work with today and love. And so that was a great experience. But it's just, that's the only way. It doesn't matter how many jobs you work. I've sold essential oils on the side. I've taught mommy and me classes. We have to be able to meet our basic needs. And especially for women who can find themselves in abusive situations, either at work or at home, we need to be able to leave when it is time to go without worrying, how am I going to pay the bills? And so I devote all my time to that because I don't see another option. That's just what we have to do. So I just get Evelyn and we go.
Awesome. Well, just after listening to Adam, I mean, first, thank you for sharing your story and really appreciate it. And it's such an important side, a part of the picture. Adam was just talking about when he looks at data, when he knows that the data is individuals, but when he just looks at the big picture data, he's like, we have to we're at a moment where this has to happen. Like it's going to get very, we're going to go down a bad path pretty quickly if we don't really put our energy behind this. And I think that having organizers and advocates like you who get it and are like, it's this or what, I think it's a lot of what brought me to basic income also. I have a 14-year-old son and there was a certain point where I was like, oh, what the hell am I doing? I was like designing, digital products for like cars and stuff. I'm like, this does not matter. And I'm now 47, so I'm getting to the age where it's like, I'm thinking about like, okay, if I get sick and my son is like, what did you do with your life? I'm like, not going to say I made another cool gaming app. I want to say like, I fought for you to be better, to be in a better place than when you were born, like that is what I owe you. And so I think that fuel that our children give us can be a really important way, a wake-up call really, and also the inspiration we need to just get up each day and do it, because if not for them, who?
Absolutely. And I also have to say, I always hear Martin Luther King Jr. in my ear, and he said that our lives begin to end the day that we stop. Our lives begin to end the day that we, what was the quote? When it stops mattering, right? Our lives begin to end the day that we stop. And this matters. All of these things matter. Basic income matters, racial equality matters. And so I have to get up every morning and do it because we just have to.
That's right. That's right.
The day that we become silent about the things that matter, that's it. Our lives begin to end the day.
I knew it was going to come.
I rehearsed that so much, and then I'm on here and I'm fumbling it. But yes, that is a quote I live by.
That's a good, that is an important one. And so you can be living by it without even ever having heard it, but like when you hear it, it rings so true. It's great. So you're in Atlanta, and so obviously 2021 has been a pretty serious year for what's been happening in Georgia. And so I want to kind of take us back. We started the conversation with Anna Aurilio when I said, like, what are some of the highlights? And she talked about the runoff as this really important marker moment. And I don't think she said this specifically, but I remember when we were heading into the holidays in 2020, and everyone was like, one check is not enough, there needs to be another stimulus check. The importance of that specific, just one idea of like, we need to have another check, and that that the Democrats said, we're going to give you another $2,000, and the Republicans said, we're not, was just like a really clear, line in the sand. When Mitch McConnell was like, I mean, I think we all were just like, oh my gosh, this is becoming a really big, important issue. So I know that you were heavily involved in the runoff. You organized over a dozen events during the runoffs. Tell us a little
almost
bit about
20, I think. Yeah, well, I had co-founded the Humanity Forward Georgia the year before, or that year. And so I had amazing colleagues and volunteers. When Yang announced he was coming to Georgia, the whole Yang gang nationally just came together. Lots of people came in. So I had tons of support, but I just knew, like you said, they drew that line in the sand. And I don't necessarily identify as a Democrat, but I put all in for those two guys, because I was like, if we don't stop Mitch McConnell now, there will be no more money.
That's right.
And so we did the basics. We did, weekly letter writing parties on Zoom. We did weekly sign holding events. But a couple of the things that we did that I'm really proud of were inspired by income movement, because for the March in 2020, we had to get creative. And so you guys had offered cities like a variety of events, things like bike parades, car parades, art installations. And so I really took that cue from you. And we made a really fun art installation. We had a 6-foot tall cutout of, it was a cardboard cutout of Mitch McConnell. And then we took old campaign signs from around town, and we had put like 2 gravestones per sign. And we put like bipartisan bills that he had killed in the Senate for no reason. And we put them up. We had about 25 of those. And so we would go to parks like Piedmont Park. We went down to Savannah, to Forsyth Park, the west end of Atlanta, and we would just put it up. And of course, people are going to come over like, what the heck is this? And we're like, this is our future if you don't vote for these 2 guys,
That's so awesome. That's great. There is something really powerful and impactful to like the imagery of something, that takes up space and it just attracts attention. When we did the eviction notice installation, which the LA crew is doing again this year for their rally, there's something really kind of crazy when you can see it all. We think of like data visualizations and like cool things, but like when you actually create a visualization, a physical installation that is a visualization of like, look at all these things, it's really pretty cool. And it's also just great photo opportunities and like those are a lot.
Yes, and we did do a car parade also. I unfortunately caught COVID right before the car parade, and so I wasn't at my own event. I hated that, but we had about 10 cars, and we rode around downtown. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun organizing during the runoffs.
So you are in Atlanta, and so we moved very, the runoffs happened and actually like happened pretty quickly. It felt like that momentum of building, and then just a couple months later, the spa shootings happened in Atlanta. And I wanted to just talk a little bit with you. So much of the work that we do as advocates is because we know the intersectionality of race and economic injustice and gender, like all these things are just so intertwined. So many of us are working across a wide variety of different issues. And I know you very much so took to heart what was happening in your community around Asian hate. And I'd love to know how you responded to that as an organizer, as a community member.
So that's an interesting, because about a week before the shootings happened, there was an Emory grad student, her name's Allison Wang, and she hit up the Humanity Forward Georgia website, which I get the emails from that. And she was like, I would like to organize a rally for my community. Like, I've seen all the violence against Asians and it really upsets me, but I have no organizing experience. Could someone help me? And I was like, oh, you got the right girl. I will help you. And so we were actually planning more of like a community celebratory event. And then we had actually had 3 meetings, and then the shootings happened. And so I called a fellow activist, Will Lexham. I had met him. He came to Atlanta during the runoffs to help, and I had met him at some of our events there. And he does a lot of work in New York and LA with big rallies of Stop Asian Hate and unity movement and things like that. So I was like, we need to get this guy down here with us. So me and Allison and Will and another girl, Claire, we spent the next 72 hours on Zooms We were on Zooms with all of the AAPI leaders in Atlanta. I mean, it was just Allison as a grad student, her friend Claire, and then me and Will. But we ended up with the senators speaking at the rally, and Reverend Barber came, and there was over 1,000 people that showed up. We really didn't want it to be political. We didn't invite the senators because we wanted everyone to feel included, and we were just trying to create a space for the community to grieve what had happened. But I guess it just got so big that the senators wanted to come and speak, and you don't say no. So it's like I probably got to meet them after all the events I had organized for them. But it was really amazing to work in the Asian American community. Evelyn wants to say hi. Yes, thank you, baby. And I made a lot of new friends, and I really saw how that community was hurting. And so I got involved in their things. I spoke at a few things about including Asian American studies in the K through 12 curriculum, like making that mandatory. And also, okay, honey. And then I also helped. We did that community day that we were planning, the big celebration. We also did that as well. And so I made a lot of connections, and now these people are helping me with the Basic Income March this year. They're some of my fellow organizers. And so I really got, that community to mix with the basic income community. And we just see how it all, we all work together. It's great to build coalitions like that.
That's right. That's fantastic. I know it feels like there's so much work on the coalition side happening in different cities, that the Basic Income March is this opportunity either to start forging those or to further solidify those. It's been really cool to hear what different organizers, kind of how inspired and excited they're getting about those relationships that they're building in organizations that are doing really cool and important work in their neighborhoods. You just started to talk a little bit about this year's Basic Income March. Tell us about what you have planned in Atlanta.
So the last couple of years, we marched and we held signs at the Capitol, but the problem with the Capitol in Atlanta is nobody works there on Saturday, and it's not in like a walkable part of the city. So there wasn't really a lot of foot traffic or bystanders. And I love marching, but with the last year marching with the tragic loss of life from APD, the Atlanta Police Department brutality and the spa shootings, I was just like, I don't know if we're going to march in Atlanta this year. So I decided we're going to celebrate. And like you said, we have made strides. I mean, like some of the other speakers have said, in 2019, people are like $1,000 a month, you're crazy. But now it's like, okay, we have the child tax credit. So we have definitely made big strides in the past 2 years. And so I wanted it to be a little bit of a celebratory thing as well. So we are going to go to the Georgia Beer Garden, which is a place that does a lot of political rallies. Yang had a rally there. And we're going to hear from some people in the community. I've got a local artist who created some work to display. And I've got some just regular, some of my Asian friends and stuff that are just going to talk about what basic income would mean in their life. And I have some child tax credit recipients who are going to talk about what that's meant to them. And then I've got a couple of mayoral candidates and city council candidates, and they're going to listen to what they hear, and then they're going to respond and show their support. So I'm looking forward to hearing from our community members. And I like putting, regular people on stage, because so many times we'll come out and we'll listen to all these thought leaders and these really smart, intelligent people and just come away feeling like really humbled. And I'm like, well, let's hear from people like you and me, like what would basic income mean to you? And let's make these elected officials listen to this before they get to talk.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. I know. And it is, I feel like a gift that the child tax credit has given us, in that there are millions of people in all of our cities, who are receiving monthly checks. And so we have the ability to bring together people and give them a platform to tell their stories. It's really kind of an amazing gift for us to be able to have an opportunity to it's like having one massive pilot happening all across the country, where you're just gonna be like, okay, how do I, and I love that you're spending, so much of this year is really focused on your community members and elevating those voices. And I think it's a theme throughout a lot of the marches and rallies and concerts. A lot of the people who are speaking are other organizers, people in the community, and then just people who have received, been part of the child tax credit or a pilot, to be able to talk about like what it's meant to them. And I think that's such an important part of what we can do as we do our work. So I'm really looking forward to seeing video and photos of your event. And I love that it's happening at a beer garden. That's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to see the transition from like one beer to two beers in the photos of just like things are going to become much more like kind of genial and joyful and, you know, celebratory as you continue through the
Right.
That's awesome. So we're kind of coming up towards the top of our time together, but I would love to know, are you keeping your eye on anything or thinking about 2022? And you've been involved in so many things. Are you excited about something, or there's something you want to put time and energy into as we head into the new year?
There is, but you guys are going to have to read Andrew Yang's new book, Forward, to find out what I'll be doing next year.
Nice. That's
He's going to be
awesome.
working to break the duopoly, and we're just going to keep, fighting for basic income. And I'm in college. I actually went back to school to major for nonprofit management. So I'm learning, doing public administration and like social welfare policy and stuff like that. So I'm interested in finishing out the year and graduating and taking all that knowledge and starting something up.
That's fantastic. Well, you mentioned Andrew, and Andrew is speaking at the Mountain View event, the rally in Mountain View on Saturday. So and that's going to get filmed and all of that kind of stuff. So everybody's going to be able to hear a little bit more of what maybe he'll give a little bit more of a sneak peek also about 2022. Well, awesome. This has been a lovely conversation. I'm really glad. I think this is the first time we just had a chance to chat, and we did it in a very public manner. Thanks for being game and being part of this. Really, really appreciate it.
No, yes, thanks for having me. I just love everything you guys are doing, and I love working with y'all. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and give your kiddo a high five from us. It was great to see her.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.